to administer the oath of office to Jamal Osman, our newly elected colleague who will represent Ward 6. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Osman, will you raise your right hand, please? Do you, Jamal Osman, having been elected to the office of Council Member Ward 6 of and for the City of Minneapolis, now solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution and laws of the State of Minnesota, and the Charter and ordinances of the City of Minneapolis, and that you will well and faithfully perform and discharge the duties of the office to which you have been elected throughout your term of service?
I do.
Congratulations, Council Member Osman.
Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Thank you all, and congratulations to Councilmember Osman. Welcome to the City Council. We are so excited to have a 6th Ward Council member joining us, and I really appreciated the time that you took to meet with me a couple of weeks ago. As I shared then, you are joining a team of colleagues who's ready to support you in this role, and we are here to work together and support each other. Sometimes we have different perspectives, but we always come to work ready to be part of this team, and we're so glad to have you join us. So I will turn it over to you, Councilmember Osman, and welcome any remarks you would like to make.
Thank you, Council President. I am excited to be joining you. I was sent here to represent Ward 6 residents, and I'm super excited, and I need your help to make a difference in our ward and greater Minneapolis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks to your family. Thank you, and thanks to your family as well. I know that this job takes a lot from our partners and our children, so I see you're moving along, but just thank you to your whole family for being willing to support your service to our city. All right, so we are ready to proceed. I will pause and see if any other council members would like to offer brief comments at this time after the swearing in.
I would appreciate the brief opportunity, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate, and I guess with the entire council, council member now, Osman, and welcome him to the City Council. Jamal actually has worked in the neighborhood for years where I live, so in ways we're nearby neighbors. Also, as all of you know, the 2nd Ward and the 6th Ward share the Seward neighborhood, share boundaries, share the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, and I will say that we have missed not having representation there, and we really appreciate the courage that it took and all the hard work that it took in these particular times to run for office and to get elected, and that really demonstrates some really positive attributes. I also want to say that me and my office and all of us are here to help with this transition. I found the City of Minneapolis to be an absolutely fabulous place to work. I will say one of the things that makes it more interesting is the challenges that we face here. And I will say that you are entering the City Council during one of the most challenging phases of managing the city that I've ever experienced in the course of my 4 terms here. So we're here to stand with you and support you. We welcome you, and we wish you all the best of luck in the world.
Thank you. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. And I too just want to offer my congratulations to Councilmember Osman, as well as offer my support. I worked closely with Councilmember Warsame when he represented the 6th Ward, and really would hope to do the same, is to finish out this term. I know it was a really difficult time to be campaigning in the midst of a global pandemic, as well as the the very real and challenging uprisings that our city has been dealing with. And so to be able to run a campaign in that environment is really commendable. And just want to really, again, echo Councilmember Gordon's comments that these are very challenging times, but we are a team and we will work through this all together. So welcome, sir, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Congratulations. I'm so excited to get a chance to work with you. And, I wish we could all be there in person today. Before our council meetings, there's usually a certain energy and kind of buzz in the air, and we're all together in the chambers, and there's staff and guests, and it's a lot of fun, and it would have been really amazing to be there with you today. And obviously, given the circumstances, we can't, but no less exciting. The excitement is felt over here, certainly, and I'm sure among all of my colleagues, and we just can't wait to meet you in person for those of us that haven't, but very excited to work with you. And congratulations as well. And, any support you need, we're here for you. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham.
Good morning and congratulations. Just wanted to say welcome to the City Council from your colleague on the north side. So thank you so much for putting in the time and the energy and the effort to run a campaign and to seek out this leadership position, particularly during these challenging times. I am at the ready to be able to support you as you navigate stepping into the middle of a term during a couple of crises. We're across town from each other, but I've got your back. So feel free to reach out, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks to each of you. And with that, I'm going to call to order this regular meeting for Friday, August 28th. I'll note that this meeting has remote participation by council members and city staff as authorized under the provisions of Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Section 13D.021, due to the declared state of local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll to verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Reich.
Present.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Here.
Councilmember Schrader.
Here.
Councilmember Osman.
Present.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Present.
Councilmember Ellison.
Present.
Councilmember Goodman.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Palmisano. Councilmember Gordon.
Here.
Councilmember Cano.
Here.
Vice President Jenkins.
Here.
President Bender.
Here.
There are 13 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Colleagues, today's agenda is before us. Are there any amendments to the agenda? And we do have the one amendment, which is a notice of introduction. Mr. Clerk, can you help me with the details of that ordinance introduction?
Yes, Madam President, there are actually two items to amend to the agenda today. The first is a motion by Vice President Jenkins and Councilmember Goodman, and this is to include under the order of introduction and referral the introduction of the subject matter of an ordinance which seeks to amend the zoning code, and this is related to exterior security devices. So that would be the first amendment being proposed to the agenda. The second is the addition of a resolution extending the period of the declared state of emergency made just this past Wednesday by Mayor Fry, and that proposes to add the resolution extending that stated declared state of emergency from and to 6 a.m. On Monday, this coming Monday, 6 a.m. Monday, August 31st.
Thank you. So I will go ahead and move both of those agenda items, the one from Councilmember Goodman and Jenkins, and then the emergency declaration as well. Councilmember Goodman.
I'm working on it. Sorry. Technology, right? Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to note on behalf of Councilmember Jenkins and I that we are bringing forward a notice of introduction to make some changes to our roll-up security window policy. I remember when we banned these a long time ago, and those were very different times, and I just cannot ignore the pleas of business owners who feel that they need to use these kinds of roll-up windows, at least in the near term, in order to provide safety for glass that's been broken around the city. And the alternative, quite frankly, I think is worse, which is keeping the glass and putting almost like a metal barricade on the inside of the building, which I think looks about as bad, if not worse, than these roll-ups. I can't speak for Councilmember Jenkins, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to rally the community to use public art on these should they move forward. But I want to provide a level of assurance to businesses that are worried about this, that we are attempting to move forward and trying to figure out a way that we can create a win-win where these barriers can be installed, but they add to the public right-of-way and public streetscape and not make all businesses look like something that no one would want to go to. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Councilmember Goodman. I'm very happy to be a co-author on this. I do think this extraordinary time in our history calls for responsive and flexibility from the City Council to be able to really look at, these ordinances that may or may not necessarily serve our community in the ways that we want them to now. And so I too hope that we can incorporate public art into some of these barriers for businesses that choose to go that route, and would be supportive of helping folks think about how they can create that kind of atmosphere. I have, the technology around these roll-up windows and the design have changed quite a bit over the past 20 years since I think this ordinance went into place. And so I think we will see a very different kind of roll-up windows as we move across. I do want to just say I'm really just concerned about the number of replacement windows that businesses all throughout the city have had to do. Many businesses have been hit multiple times, and it is deeply unfortunate. And this is one step to try to help people protect their businesses and their livelihoods. So happy to support this today.
Thank you. Any further comments on the agenda? I have moved the agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Clerk will call the roll on the agenda, on the amended agenda.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries and the agenda is adopted. Our first item of business is acceptance of the minutes from our regular meeting on August 14th. May I have a motion to adopt those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman. Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison. Councilmember Ellison. Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison. Vice President Bender.
Aye.
There are 11 ayes, 1 abstention, 1 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. It looks like Councilmember Ellison tried to vote, but perhaps was having a technical issue. So I know the team is working to help him unmute his line.
Councilmember Ellison.
Can you guys hear me now?
I hear you. Are you voting
Oh.
aye on the minutes?
Yes, I am.
There are 12 ayes and 1 abstention.
Thank you. The next item of business is the referral of petitions, communications, and reports to the proper committees. May I have that motion, please?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Abstain.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes and 1 abstention.
That carries and those matters are referred. With that, we'll proceed to the mayor's regular report on the state of our local public health emergency under the item of new business. Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President, City Council members, Councilmember Osman, congratulations. We are proud to have you on our team here at the City Enterprise. This is an extraordinary group of individuals that are all working so hard for the betterment of our community, and I know that you're on board with that vision. So welcome. I look forward to swinging down to see you in person here after this report is finalized and the council meeting's over. So as you all know, this report is intended in general to share information on the state of the public health emergency, specifically that of COVID-19. And while this report will not be about some of the events that have happened over the last several days, I will give a couple of updates just up front in the intro. On Wednesday, I issued an emergency declaration and simultaneously an emergency regulation for a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew. And given the significant looting that was occurring in downtown Minneapolis, you've likely heard that the unrest was activated, at least in part, by misinformation related to the murder-suicide in the city that afternoon. In addition, we issued an emergency regulation that allowed for swift action to board up the broken windows, and a second emergency regulation to extend the curfew last night from 8 p.m. To 6 a.m. Our city has gone through a lot in the last several months, continue to have a great deal of faith in our community, our resiliency, and that we can be and will be even stronger as we work through this very challenging time together. Moving into the report regarding COVID-19, there have been 17 emergency regulations to date. The most recent still in that vein was the bar area closures. Moving towards the health report by the numbers, the total approximate completed number of tests is 1,427,347. That's over 200,000 more than this last time we met. Total positive number is 72,390, close to 10,000 more than the last time we met. Patients who no longer need to be isolated are around 68,876. There have been 1,806 deaths, which is about 200 more than the last time we met. In Hennepin County, of those 72,000 cases statewide, 22,000 of them are within the county. 877 deaths within our county. The total cases requiring hospitalization are 6,326, with 305 hospitalized as of today and 139 in the ICU as of today. For Minneapolis case information, 8,768 positive cases, which is more than last time we've met. The total hospitalized is 1,050. The total recovered is 8,077, and the deceased is 299. As I'm reading off these numbers here, I'm realizing that there's likely some misinformation in here, so I'm going to ask for later on after this report is over, perhaps to get some more accurate numbers regarding the Minneapolis case information so that we can disseminate the correct facts for the public. Minneapolis demographic data, you can see there in the graphs. I won't go into it in detail, but certainly if there are questions, we can have one of our respective experts answer them. The health department is conducting over 50 case investigations and contact follow-ups per day for individuals diagnosed with COVID-19. Currently, there are 26 investigators, including 6 non-Minneapolis Health Department staff. Of the 8,768 cases in Minneapolis, 85.3% have been interviewed, 2.1% have refused, 9.3% have been lost to follow-up, and 3.3% are new cases that still need to be interviewed. 28% of interviews of Minneapolis residents are in a language other than English. For communications, the health department is working with city comms to amplify the Mask Up MPLS media campaign to encourage mask wearing, especially among young adults. New campaign materials featuring Minnesota Lynx players will launch later this week. And the Minneapolis Health Department and comms staff are also working with the State Department to develop messaging to promote flu vaccinations among BIPOC communities and other at-risk groups. For community testing, MHD continues to work with community partners and clinics to host free COVID-19 testing events, and so far this week, more than 650 people were tested at 2 events focused on low-income families and on BIPOC communities. For food security, MHD and NCR continue to co-host a weekly free food distribution event on Fridays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Powderhorn Park. 400 to 700 households, primarily serving Latino communities. City staff are working to support pop-up food distribution sites and other community organizations as they address equity, accessibility, and other systemic barriers to food security and distribution. And city staff are identifying potential operating options and regulatory frameworks for pop-ups that want to continue operating long-term. This week, staff have also placed hygiene stations and trash receptacles at 2 encampments located on city-owned land, one behind the former Kmart site on Lake Street and another on 9th Avenue and 13th Street. And staff will continue to monitor some of the health and safety needs at these sites and, of course, other encampments across the city. We've distributed 4,645 masks just in the last week and another 110 bottles of hand sanitizer to neighborhood organizations, small businesses, and faith communities. Specific efforts included distributing masks at the Black Entrepreneur State Fair, the Powderhorn Park weekly free food distribution, and then city-sponsored community testing events as well. Minneapolis Public Schools has also outlined 5 phases for students returning to full-time classroom learning and will start the school year under phase 2, distance learning, with student supports. Health department school-based clinic staff will provide health education, medical, and mental health services to students by appointment, either in person or through virtual consultation. Clinics are located within Edison, Henry, Longfellow, Roosevelt, South, Southwest, and Washburn high schools. For procurement, as of August 26, 2020, there has been $5,480,939 spent. The total increase of $7,500 can be attributed to an amendment to the Take Action Education Fund contract. I want to be clear, this is not the total related to COVID. The total spend is in the tens of millions. Violent crime is up about 17.5 year to date, and property crimes are up 3.9% year to date. Moving on to the Office of Violence Prevention, the OVP hosted various community screenings of the movie The Interrupters for community in locations in both North and South Minneapolis to introduce community to the concept behind violence interruption. GVI continues to do intakes with individuals looking to change their lives, and outreach staff are working to deliver services and custom notifications with some adjustments in the delivery model due to COVID-19. Contracts with neighborhood associations who will host violence interruption outreach teams are almost finalized, and we hope to begin the work within the next week once those contracts are fully extended. The community risk, moving on to fire, community risk reduction officers have been working with communications to create a virtual fire station tour that kids and adults can access from home during the COVID-19 pandemic. Community risk reduction officers are also scheduling virtual presentations with MPS, as well as the University of Minnesota and other businesses. The MFD responded to 4 structure fires, which was 2 nights ago. I'm sure they can provide an update on those, predominantly located around Brits Pub, Tires Plus, Walgreens, and then the China Walk.
Mayor, Councilmember Schrader has a question or comment.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Mayor, this is going back to the report on MPD and also on the Office of Violence Prevention. First of all, I want to thank you for including the Office of Violence Prevention. I think my critique of previous reports is we hear all about just the problems about the violent crime. But unlike every other department in the city, we're not hearing how taxpayers' dollars are going towards solving that problem. So it's helpful to hear what the Office of Violence Prevention is doing to reduce violent crime, but it would also be helpful to hear, things like how many arrests have been made, how many open cases are being made, what leads are being made, just to hear, how taxpayer dollars are being used by MPD and how it's having an effect in the city.
Thank you, Madam President, Council Member Schrader. So as I noted, this report and my obligation under the emergency declaration is to report specifically on COVID-19 related issues. Now, we have at times gone beyond that to try and provide additional information as much as possible. Obviously, there's been quite a lot going on these last couple days, and so our staff has been working incredibly hard to make sure that the city has been safe and protected. To provide some additional information, if you are in fact looking to that, year to date, and the Office of Violence Prevention I would put in that category as well. It's some additional information that we're trying to provide. We can't provide every last bit in a report that is simply delivered by me. Obviously, if there is additional information that you are looking for, I would strongly encourage you to have the experts in their particular area come and present at one of the committees. That would be the right area for receiving and actually digging into some of these substantial details rather than just have an overarching overview. To give you a little bit of additional information, year to date, the shooting victim total is up. It's the highest in the last 5 years with 347 victims. That's up 82%. 156 more victims compared to this time in 2019. A total of 29 victims of gunshot wounds in the past 2 weeks through Monday, August 24th. Arrest data over the last week is still being collected. As you can imagine, over the last couple of nights, there are some moving pieces that we're presently sorting through. to get you finalized and accurate information.
Councilmember Schrader, did you have a follow-up?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the cycle we keep coming into is that we keep talking about the statistics, and those are important for the public to know, but without the other part of hearing, what MPD is doing, what our officers are doing, what our taxpayer dollars are doing, it really doesn't tell the full story. And that's something I've been coming back to week after week. I'm certainly, of course, not asking, for something that is going to be hard on staff to present. I'm asking for the same level of detail that we're getting from every other department. If you can't get arrest data for the last week, and of course this week would be one of those weeks that there would be, of course, given an exception, going over the last couple weeks would be fine. It's just an idea to be public, to not just have me ask a question and get that back, but to have it on the public record so people can understand what is going on with MPD right now.
Madam President, Councilmember Schrader, first, once again, I would point you back to the fact that this emergency declaration, our responsibilities under it, are related to COVID-19 and the health pandemic, similar to how there is decorum in the city council, where you don't just randomly ask other city council members questions that they're required to answer. This is specifically related to COVID-19. I'm happy to be as transparent with you as we possibly can. There's a lot of information, a lot of things that are presently happening in the city. And as I said last week and the week before, and I believe the week before that, we would be happy to provide additional information. What I would strongly suggest is that you have a resident expert from MPD, the chief or otherwise, present at a committee in full form where we can really dig into the details, provide the public not just with a glance, but a full baked concept of what they're actually doing on the ground day to day. That is the information that you're looking for. In order to get that information, let's have it at a committee meeting where we can dig in long form rather than just touch along the edges to make a point. So
thanks, Mayor. It looks like Mr. Carl wants to make a statement. I will say that you have been including crime statistics updates in every report to the City Council. So if it's not appropriate for this venue, perhaps we should touch base about how to best communicate that information, because I think it's a little challenging for council members to hear that top line information without much context each week. We did have Chief Arredondo come to our POGO meeting, and he is going to do a study session on September 15th, and we're very grateful for him taking that time. And then Mr. Carl wanted to chime in. Mr. Carl.
Madam President, thank you. I simply wanted to state exactly what you did, in case Councilmember Schrader or others weren't aware, that the intention of these weekly reports, of course, is stated as the COVID, with the presentation by Chief Arredondo at the last POGO committee meeting. There was a directive to come back with a study session, and at your request, Madam President, the clerk's office and our information technology department have been working very diligently with the police department to pull together a lot of the data that we've been listening that's been requested over the multiple weeks during these presentations. It was our intent to bring forward at that study session what we anticipate being more of a public accessible data dashboard that gets to the data that Councilmember Schrader has been requesting, to make sure that that data is presented, to make sure it is in context, and to make sure that it is updated on a regular basis going forward. And I also have been in touch with the chief about having him appear at future committee meetings or study sessions as appropriate in order to separately update the council on the issues of public safety and police department operations, so that those are in those proper venues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam President. And to be clear, and I appreciate the update from the clerk, I certainly welcome that information. But to be really clear, this is not supposed to be a very hard question. It's supposed to be a very basic question. I completely understand that these reports are suffering for our updates around the city's response to COVID-19. But what I'm hearing from every single constituent is that they're not just suffering, the trauma of dealing with COVID-19. They're still dealing with the trauma of the uprising, of the murder of George Floyd. All these things are happening at once. If the city council is going to get an update, I think it is very helpful and transparent to all of our constituents to have those quick top line 1,000-foot level update full stories of what is going on in the city and how they can feel safe, what is being done, and frankly, how they are being heard. So I'm not looking for the specific data that my requests seem to be being heard as. I am asking for very basic information that can help constituents understand what is going on with the city.
Madam President, Councilmember Schrader, we are happy to provide those updates. On the one hand, last week you were asking for specific information, which I then followed up with an email to ask, and no additional specific information was provided. On the other hand, you want large presentations from the chief, which we are more than happy to provide. We want to give you as much in-depth information as possible, whether it was regarding arrests, which you originally requested, or whether it's regarding into what is happening in terms of policing. We're happy to provide the general, we're happy to provide the specific, we're happy to provide all of it. As we've stated week after week after week, it is most effective if that presentation can come in the form of a study session. I'm thankful that that study session is now moving forward. What would be even more helpful is if you had additional specific questions that we could have them asked ahead of time so we can make sure that the chief is prepared to answer every single one of them. We want to get the information out. It's necessary that we all do our due diligence and our homework in making sure that that information is projected ahead of time so that we can get the right information to you.
Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to belabor this point, but just to address some of the points you're making, I just don't think this is helpful to go back and forth of I didn't ask specific questions or enough. I've asked specific questions. I have not gotten answers. I can giving examples like the email you sent back said it was a very basic question and then didn't proceed to answer that. I'll follow up with the chief. I have specific questions. You know, I thought it was a great that to see him in committee. But even then, I had questions that I had heard specifically from a precinct inspector that completely contradicted what the police chief was saying. And so I followed up on that. I still haven't gotten answers, but I will continue to do that. I'll follow up with the chief on those specific questions.
Thank you, council member. And we'd be happy to provide the email verification of all of it. Very general question, got a very general response. We want to provide you the information once again. I think the right place to do it is the study session. And so I'm very glad that the council is moving forward with that. That would be the right venue to answer these questions. We want to get you all the information. If you have specific questions, please ask them. We will answer them. If you have general questions, please ask them and we will answer those as well.
Okay, thank you both. And I will obviously need to be following up here about the detail of this presentation and how to get information out. We have Councilmember Fletcher in queue on a different topic.
Thank you, Council President. Mayor, I'm getting questions this morning from businesses just looking for clarity about the status of the curfew. Have you made a determination about curfew for tonight or over the weekend? And what guidance can we provide people about what the plan is in the immediate short term?
Madam President, Councilmember Fletcher, great question. Councilmember, if it's all right, can I discuss that right after this presentation is over? I was going to try and get through and then talk about some of the updates regarding the emergency declaration and then the potential for any further curfews. It's a totally fair question, and I'm happy to answer. I'm trying to keep on the.
Yep,
that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you both. And we do have the action item on the emergency declaration coming up right after your report.
Great, thank you. And again, Councilmember, I want to make very clear, don't want to disregard the question. I'm just trying to keep intact with where I am in the presentation thus far. Moving on here to the state and federal activity, the possibility of a fourth special session in September remains. IGR staff continues to work on legislative priorities with the Minneapolis delegation in anticipation of any opportunities if a special session is in fact called. Usually during this time of year, especially a general election year, legislative activity halts and attention and time is devoted to the major parties' national conventions. However, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the House back into session for one day, which was Saturday, August 21st, for a vote on a bill that provides $25 billion in emergency funding for the U.S. Postal Service and blocks operational changes rolled out under Postmaster General. For the GAP funding package, community prevention partners, Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, and city staff continue to work through the list to complete the full verification and approval process for each applicant. As of Tuesday, August 25th, 844 applicants have been approved, totaling $1,249,547.68 in emergency assistance payments. As reported at the last few meetings, the small business forgivable loans have been fully awarded. The value of $1,550,000 that was awarded to 173 small businesses. Thank you for your time and partnership on this report. I will start any questions by answering Councilmember Fletcher's question. Councilmember, and for the question, and please don't hesitate to correct me, was they're getting some outreach and feedback from several of our businesses that are wondering the status of an additional regulation regarding curfew for tonight. As was previously stated, the first night had a curfew of 10 a.m. to 6 a.m. The second night had 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Second night had a regulation of 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. I'm about to talk with the chief just following this call. My understanding is that he is not recommending an additional curfew for tonight. And I plan to have a discussion with him to finalize and formalize that decision. Again, I don't want to give you a definitive right now on the call because I need to get a complete briefing of some of the intel that we're anticipating for tonight. And while we talked early in the morning, several times actually, just hours ago, last night, want to make sure that I've got all of the up-to-date information regarding what happened between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. So the likely answer is no, there will not be one, but I want to make sure that we're finalizing that decision just after this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If in the event that we do have another curfew, I'm wondering if we would be able to clarify who's exempt from that curfew. I know last night there were a group of people from the National Lawyers Guild and from the Legal Rights Center who were out trying to intercept folks who were coming out of jail. And there was sort of a handshake sort of agreement that they wouldn't be considered in violation of the curfew, but different jurisdictions were treating them differently. And DC4s, who was in charge of incident command last night, was extremely helpful in helping to resolve and to make sure that these sort of legal workers and lawyers weren't arrested. But there was definitely a number of incidents where one group of officers would say they were okay to be out. Another group would sort of accost them and tell them they were going to be arrested. And so I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for us to clarify who can be out? And if press and other folks are allowed to be out, can we make it clear that folks who are from the National Lawyers Guild or the Legal Rights Center or other legal agencies looking to intercept folks coming out of jail, can we make it clear that they are allowed to be out and give folks legal representation? So that's just wanted to put that out there.
Madam President, Councilmember Ellison, yes, completely fair request. I know that the National Lawyers Guild was not explicitly referenced within the exceptions to the emergency declaration dealing with curfew, but happy to touch base with you and clarify and provide a list of specifics there.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just get clarification for the underlying purpose of the curfew. Is the underlying purpose of the curfew to protect property, to protect people's safety. Can you just give a clarification around what is the underlying purpose for the curfew?
Thank you, Madam President, Councilmember Cunningham. I'm happy also to turn this over to the chief. I'm not sure if he is presently on or if he's getting a couple hours here of well-deserved sleep. The purpose of the curfew is a combination of several things. As you mentioned, yes, it is safety. Yes, it is to help prevent some form of unnecessary property destruction. And it's also to allow for officers to better delineate between those that are protesting peacefully and those that are not. As you know, when you have these heated moments, in some cases, it's very difficult. And this is a request that has come from our chief, a request as well that was in working through decision-making processes with the state. And for given what we saw 2 nights ago, it was really essential that we retain some sense of order, and we didn't see the same kind of looting and destruction that we saw the previous night.
Madam President, if I may follow up.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So I understand that the obviously the concentration of activity was downtown. However, there was a citywide curfew, and I just want to name for the record that, you know, it makes us feel a certain kind of way on the north side when things, you know, when it feels that the property of downtown has a larger priority than our lives here in North Minneapolis. Last night, there were 2 people who were shot, or 3 people who were shot, and multiple gunfire throughout the entire north side, multiple incidents, and that happened after curfew. And so, you know, it's like those 2 things happening at the same time, like that makes us feel less, like our lives are less valued than the property downtown. And so I want to name that. I understand that the you know, concentration of activity was downtown, but the reality is that we are all under we were all expected to obey curfew, and it felt like kind of like the consequences of not obeying that was kind of a little bit more flippant, and that people were injured, and that there was violent activity that happened after curfew here on the north side that just felt acceptable. So I just wanted to name that for my constituents, because that's what I'm hearing today.
Madam President, Councilmember Cunningham, are you looking for additional law enforcement present on the north side? Is that what you're asking for?
No, what I am not looking for additional law enforcement. I am saying that that the expectations feel different for different parts of the city under this. If we're not going to have similar expectations around, you know, if we have a curfew and there is an expectation of people obeying that, if we have, you know, the priority is to protect the property downtown, and kind of like, it's okay for that to happen, you know, like violence to happen on the north side because of the fact that, you know, there wasn't a, it's just, it feels like that's more acceptable, like that our lives are valued less. I'm not necessarily saying that I have a particular solution to that. I just wanted to name that juxtaposition of experience and what I'm hearing from constituents, which is, it feels as though the downtown properties were prioritized over our lives during this time of curfew, which is why I wanted the clarification about what exactly is the purpose of the curfew, so that we can manage expectations about what that means in our lived experience as we navigate multiple realities throughout the city.
So just to be clear, you want similar expectations? Because you mentioned, Councilmember, that you wanted similar expectations. Part of having similar expectations is having the law applied similarly, which would mean a city curfew citywide as opposed to simply downtown. If you're asking for more law enforcement or more police presence in North Side, that would at least be a request that we could address. If you're not asking for police presence on the downtown, on the North Side, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how I can respond and best help you in representation in whatever you need on the North Side, because let me be very clear, we value lives on the North Side. And if there's something, and if you have any additional suggestions or solutions, by all means, we want to work with you on them.
Was the curfew downtown or citywide?
The curfew was citywide.
Okay. So, I mean, if it is citywide, then the expectations should be citywide. But like that's my point. Is I'm not necessarily saying we need more law enforcement, or like I don't necessarily have a specific solution. I hear what you're saying. I mean, we can talk about that further. I'm just talking about our lived experience and the juxtaposition of the fact that we are experiencing gun violence, and while there's a curfew happening, and the priority feels like the property downtown. So that's all I'm trying to say, is that juxtaposition does feel like it devalues Northside lives. And so I understand that you all value lives. I just needed to name that live juxtaposition at the same time. So not necessarily looking for you to whip up a solution in the moment, or put you on the spot. That's not my intention here. My intention is to name that live juxtaposition that we have here on the North Side. So thank you.
Madam President, Councilmember Cunningham, yeah, I hear you. And if there is something that you are looking for, again, we're happy to help with. Chief Ardondo is on the line, actually. Chief, do you have anything to add?
Madam Chair, council members, Mayor. No, I just wanted to say that these past 48 hours were very significant in terms of the public safety, and certainly the most appropriate and best response to try to keep peace and order and safety in our city. And so we try to do that. Oftentimes we certainly wish we could have hours and hours to try to assess everything, but oftentimes when these things spark up, it's trying to make the best informed decision with the amount of time that we have. And so, but we certainly, I as chief, I'm trying to keep in mind our entire city, the impacts that it will have. And to Councilmember Cunningham, to your point, I absolutely agree with you that there are expectations and shared experiences that many in the North Side community have that feels very differently from those who may live in other parts of our city, and that is something that I want to continue to make sure I do a better job of doing that. There is a sense of equity and safety, and sometimes that's not often felt by some in our North Side community. But no, we are going to continue. As the mayor said, I plan to have a robust conversation with him after this call to give him the best information for him to make that decision regarding curfew moving forward. But at the end of the day, it's just really about making sure that our entire city stays safe and healthy. And so, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Chief, additionally, Councilmember Schrader had a question earlier, and since you're on the line, perhaps you can ask directly. I do know that you presented just a little bit ago, and I know there's another study session coming up, but Councilmember Schrader, feel free to ask the chief.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, and as I said before, I'm just going to follow up with the chief, but just so he knows, this is going back to to the study session. Just there was a pretty concerning difference between what the chief said and what we're hearing from the 3rd Precinct Inspector about the CRT teams. But again, I can follow up after this meeting.
I think feel free right now. I think, as you mentioned, it's good to have the public information out there. And if you were asking the question before, certainly you can ask the chief now while he's on the line.
Sure, Mayor, but I do also want to point out, I think your point is good to keep these moving and be on topic. That's always been what I've been trying to do with these questions. I can get into this very specific question because it is pretty concerning about the community relations team. It is something that we've been working to get working on some problem properties about some issues in the ward. And I was told by the 3rd Precinct Inspector as well as by their crime prevention specialists that there are no CRT teams in the 3rd Ward. And what that does, because they were moving folks to do patrols. And while we certainly need folks to be on patrols, we also need officers to assist our fire inspectors and others who are trying to do the work right now under very hard conditions. And they are being told that they just aren't, there's no officers to help with that. And so, Chief, I'm happy to follow up later if you know, as the mayor suggested, want to have an answer right now, but I'm happy to follow up later.
Is there a question that you have? Because we're certainly happy to answer it.
Mayor, I don't know how my questions are not interpreted as questions. The police chief said that there are CRT teams in the 3rd Ward, or excuse me, in the 3rd Precinct, and the 3rd Precinct Inspector said there are not. I'd like to know the truth.
Chief?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Schrader, if I can answer that question for you. So at the time that you had asked me that, I had not been made aware that the 3rd Precinct CERT team had been dissolved at that time. I've come to find out since we had that conversation that you are absolutely correct. Their 3rd Precinct 3rd Precinct CERT team has been dissolved. However, Inspector McGinty is utilizing members within the 3rd Precinct there to still address and work on some of those livability issues, as well as some of the problem properties issues. I know that they are still doing details, bringing in other units and other teams within our department to try to continue to help still address some of those problems as it relates to gun violence in the 3rd Precinct. Whether it's homelessness, some livability issues, and what have you. But I do want to just, as you had stated earlier, you were absolutely correct at the time you asked the question regarding the 3rd Precinct CERT team. It is dissolved, and Inspector McGinty is utilizing other resources within the precinct to still address some of those livability issues. So I hope that clarifies it.
Thank you very much, Chief. Really appreciate that. And I'll follow up on the specifics to make sure that we can get help to the fire inspectors and others that are working in the ward.
Thank you all. I do want to just chime in here. I know that this is a very stressful time in our city, and I just want to make sure that our meetings, even in this time of stress, maintain the decorum and respect that we have established for this body. And I know that, I know that Councilmember Schrader was reflecting that we have received regular reports about rising crime and not received regular reports about what the city is doing to prevent and address that situation. And typically when we have a problem identified, like traffic crashes or eviction or housing issues, we're not just hearing about the problem, we're also expecting our staff and our policymakers and the team that we have at the city to present solutions. So that is, I think, a summary of what Councilmember Schrader has been asking for over the last several months of these reports. I know that Councilmember Cunningham was expressing on behalf of his constituents a concern about North Minneapolis, which is not a new concern. It is something that the former 4th Ward council member, I think, frequently voiced as well. And Councilmember Cunningham and others have the very difficult task of representing communities where there is violence and there is extraordinary distrust of the police. And I don't want to speak for any of my colleagues, but I do want to support them in their leadership in trying to bring, solutions to a very complex situation. And so I don't think it is helpful to try to oversimplify the solutions in communities that are hurting and afraid and that have a whole variety of perspectives. I mean, all of us are seeing that, I think, probably in every ward. And not to belabor this, but I think this is why there is such a sense of urgency around trying to start some sort of community engagement process that is staff-led and better embedded in the enterprise so that it isn't just policymakers having these separate conversations in our wards that aren't recorded or captured anywhere, so that we can help to build confidence in our community that we are moving forward in a way that reflects the complexity of the multiple layers of crisis that our community finds ourselves in. And this is a time where we have to really, I think, recognize those complexities. So as we looked at last evening and the night before, we're all wanting to make sure that our community is safe. We don't want to see people having their lives at risk because they're sleeping in a building that's been set on fire and having to be rescued, which thankfully the fire department was able to rescue the people the other night. But we also understand that there are this whole list of issues and problems that we have all named here today and for many weeks and months and years. And so I know we're all working really hard to address them together. So I just want to just kind of call on all of us to maintain that respect and partnership, even when we are coming at it from potentially different perspectives. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate this conversation. Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering, in Ward 9, who has carried, both the murder of Mr. Floyd, the Powderhorn encampments, the burning down of Lake Street, the burning down of the 3rd Precinct, is very much on the, I would say, still on the paradigm of safety response and adrenaline and trauma and just, folks are always on the go to be able to respond to issues that are happening in our community. And so as we heard about what was happening in downtown, many of us stayed up that night just communicating about the safety patrols that were happening that evening and that night on Lake Street and in Powderhorn on Cedar. And we came to realize that we probably should come together as safety patrols in Ward 9 to talk to one another and support each other, understanding that there will be more civil unrest in our city. We all know that the trial and the trials of the officers who were involved in the Chauvin and Mr. Floyd situation will be another flashpoint in time for our city. We can't predict what those moments will be exactly and when, and my main interest is in helping our community to prepare because a lot of that preparation leads to prevention. And so yesterday, my office was able to convene a meeting out in a parking lot on Lake Street with 6 different community safety patrols that are basically holding it down throughout Ward 9. And one of the main requests that was a common ask from all of those groups was precisely that exemption or waiver from the curfew policy. And so we know that the American Indian movement was granted a waiver or an exemption, and I'm very thankful to you and your staff and our police department for making that happen. We've heard through various media reports that other groups have been sort of have received the blessing of MPD to do some of this community safety work. And so the groups in Ward 9 want the same thing. And I'm curious if you could please provide guidance to me and my constituents about what is the best way for these 6 groups to have a meeting with you or your staff to get to the goal of securing this exemption, not just for yesterday or today, but literally for like the months and weeks ahead, as we know, smartly know that we will have more points in time in our city where there will be civil unrest, potentially property being burned down, potentially situations that include, acts of violence. And so just, from a point of preparing and from a point of building capacity together as a city to prevent some further harm, how can we work with you to get those exemptions?
Mayor Fry may have either
Madam
step.
Mute?
Oh, there we go.
I apologize.
Oh, I did that earlier too.
Thank you, Madam President, Councilmember Conway. Yes, I will. I'll yield to the question. I will note many of these are outside the scope of what the scope of this presentation is supposed to be about. But again, I'm happy to talk about it in this occasion. Councilmember, also thank you for your work and your collaboration and communication with our office on this particular topic. I know that you had reached out to a couple of my staff. Happy to sit down and meet, whether it's myself or staff, with several of these organizations to figure out a best path forward, noting that the circumstances of each respective curfew and/or each respective emergency may be vastly different, and therefore may require different exceptions to the overarching rule. So you're right. Happy to sit down with them to the extent that we can figure out kind of an ongoing plan. I think that is a great input. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor. I will certainly follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that, we're coming to the end of the report from the mayor, but we do have action on the emergency declaration, which includes the curfew. Perhaps, Mayor, while you're here, it would make sense to just cover the details of that, because I do believe that part of that is to give essentially our blessing for you to extend a curfew or implement a curfew in the coming days. And so maybe Mr. Clerk could describe or put up on the screen the specifics of that, and in case anyone has any further questions for you or the chief before we vote on that item.
Madam President, happy to speak to it unless Mr. Carl wanted to provide an overview before I jump in. Either way works.
Madam President, the resolution that's in front of the council is similar to all the resolutions we've done with these emergency declarations. What it does is come before the council subject to the relevant provision of the Code of Ordinances, which says that emergencies proclaimed by the mayor are in force and effect for 72 hours. At the end of that 72 hours, the council must either ratify and extend that period of emergency or can vote to terminate. The staff have proposed and drafted this resolution such that the period of declared emergency would be continued past its normal 72-hour extension. If no action were taken, the state of emergency would end at around 10:30 on Saturday evening. The staff, the chief of the Minneapolis Police Department, the mayor's office, the city coordinator, others have suggested that in order to get through the weekend, we would extend the declared state of an emergency through 6 a.m. that Monday morning, August 31st. That way, if there was a need to enhance public safety in any part of the city, the mayor would have that ability immediately. With no other action, then the adoption of this resolution would extend the emergency and it would self-terminate then at 6 a.m. on Monday, August 31st.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. And just to clarify, that would enable the mayor to implement a curfew as well as other decisions under the emergency declaration during that time frame over the weekend.
Madam President, you are correct.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, would you like to add anything?
I would. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Carl. That outlines the reasoning, I think, pretty fairly. To be clear, the goal is to not have to enact additional curfews. The goal is to, of course, not have to have additional emergency regulations that are required due to some form of safety concern or unrest. The reason for us moving forward with the emergency declaration, or I guess continuing it through early Monday morning, is so that if a precarious situation does arise, we don't need to have an emergency council meeting, say on Saturday at 5 or 6 p.m. If the situation does present itself. Again, the goal is to not do any formal additional emergency actions or regulations, but this is leaving that opportunity open in place. And of course, open to any council feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have completed the mayor's report. Unless there are any other comments or discussion on that, I will direct the clerk to receive and file the mayor's report for this council meeting. And then that moves us to this item that was on the screen, which is the approval of the declaration of emergency. Is there a motion to approve that item?
I move approval, Madam President.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that item? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano. Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and that item is adopted, that resolution. I believe that those are all of the items that are related to the mayor's report and the declaration of emergency. So I will go ahead and move on with our standing committees and defer the rest of the items that are listed under new business for the end of our agenda. So with that, we will proceed to the reports of our standing committees, beginning with the report of the Business Inspections and Zoning Committee, which will be given by its chair, Councilmember Goodman.
Good morning, Madam President, members of the council. We're bringing 10 items forward from the Business Inspections and Zoning Committee this morning. Item number 1 is an on-sale wine with strong beer license for U-Rest Dining Services. Item 2 is a application for Seven Corners Coffee. Item number 3 is a variance appeal for a property at 2209, 2211 Portland Avenue, and we did vote to deny the variances and adopt the findings of fact. Item number 4 are liquor license approvals for this week. Item number 5 are gambling license approvals. Item number 6 is a rezoning at 800 and 808 14th Avenue Southeast and 1415 8th Avenue Southeast. Item number 7 is also a rezoning at 1800 and 1806 Como Avenue Southeast. Item number 8 is a rezoning at 950 13th Avenue Northeast. Item number 9 is a street vacation at 39th Street West and Colfax Avenue South. And item number 10 is denying the Conservation District establishment of the Ivy Zenith 32nd Avenue Street Conservation District. With that, Madam President, I will move all items 1 through 10 for approval this morning.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman has moved the committee report. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Abstain.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes and 1 abstention.
That carries, and that report is adopted. Next, we have the report of the Policy and Government Oversight Committee, given by Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and I am working to pull up that report right now. We actually have 31 items to bring forward today. Item number 1 is the reappointment of John Frito as Fire Chief. But with Chief Frito's impending retirement, the committee recommends that we delete this item from our agenda today. Item number 2 is the furlough ordinance. Item number 3 is a staff direction related to the 2019 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. Item number 4 is approving the settlement of the lawsuit Hinda Ismail v. Donald Brown in the city of Minneapolis. Item number 5 approves the settlement of the worker compensations claim of Kristen Thompson and the city's appeal of Ms. Thompson's Public Employees Retirement Association appeal. Item number 6 approves CARE Act Emergency Solutions Grant Round 2 for the American Indian Community Development Corporation. Item number 7 includes several contract agreements related to the Housing Stabilization Pilot Program, which is shown on the agenda. Items number 8 through 14 are various contract amendments related to the public service building. Details are again on the agenda. Item number 15 is a contract amendment that authorizes an increase to the contract with Messinger Construction Company for construction modifications due to unforeseen conditions for the Americans with Disabilities Act All Gender Restroom Improvements Projects. Item number 16 approves and authorizes the customization of the terms and conditions of a contract with U.S. Bank N.A. known as Elevon Inc. for merchant card processing services. Item number 17 is a resolution related to the refunding of previously issued general obligation bond series. Item number 18 authorizes a multi-year lease with Lothenbach Properties 2 LLC and Imagine Express LLC for the use of 2633 Minnehaha Avenue as the 3rd precinct temporary site. Item number 19 authorizes a contract with North Point Health Wellness Center to provide domestic violence prevention programming services. Excuse me. Item number 20 authorizes a name change of the West Calhoun neighborhood to the West Makaska neighborhood. Is that the full name of the neighborhood? I'm not sure. Item number 21 authorizes the joint powers agreement of the City of St. Cloud and the Board of Water Commissioners of the City of St. Paul. Item number 22 authorizes a conditional right of entry agreement with BAE Systems for environmental monitoring. Item number 23 is the authorization of a cooperative agreement with Hennepin County for water main construction costs related to the reconstruction of the County State Aid Highway 204. Item number 24 is a resolution establishing a prioritized bridge replacement list. Item number 25 authorizes an increase of a contract for additional work and costs associated with unforeseen conditions at the Mid-City Industrial Phase 2 reconstruction project. Item number 26 authorizes an increase to a contract with Affinitech Inc. for Minneapolis Parking Integrated Video Management System. Item number 27 approves the layout for the 42nd Street East reconstruction project between 46th Street South and West River Parkway. Item number 28 encompasses several actions related to the acceptance of a grant from the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization. Item number 29 is the acceptance of a low bid of PCI Roads Inc. to furnish all materials, equipment, labor, and tools necessary to install a sanitary sewer manhole for the Fridley Sewer Improvement Projects. And item number 30 is the acceptance of a low bid of CY Con Inc. to provide all materials, labor, equipment, and incidentals necessary for the Minneapolis Plaza ramp, 12th Street snow removal system repair, and authorizing a contract for the project. Item number 31 encompasses the acceptance of several low bids for public towing services. Madam President, I move approval of the Policy Government Oversight Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to pull number 18, having to do with the lease for a motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Jenkins has moved the committee report. We will pull item 18 for motion and discussion. I will confirm that the neighborhood name, the new name would be West McCoska, following the renaming of the lake as Bidet McCoska. And thank you, Council Vice President, for moving the report. Is there any further discussion?
Just thank you for that clarification of the West Madaska neighborhood. Appreciate that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll on items 1 through 17 and 19 through 31. And
Councilmember,
I'm sorry that we should clarify that that did include a motion to delete item 1, I believe.
correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Abstain.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes and 1 abstention.
That carries, and those items are deleted and adopted as appropriate. Councilmember Osman, of course, is abstaining from the items that he was not on the council for as they came through the process. And we look forward to next time. We do also have some background noise, so I'll just check that everyone can mute their computers or lines. Thank you. Okay, so those items are adopted. That returns us back to item 18. Councilmember Gordon.
And I'm wondering if the noise is coming from here because I'm working out of City Hall and they're doing some work on the building, and I apologize for that.
It is you, Councilmember Gordon.
Well, let me know if you want me to get up and try to relocate, and I apologize for that.
Councilmember Gordon, if you want to come to my seat in the chamber, we're not hearing that noise here, and you probably would have an easier time.
I think we could move forward right now with what your motion, council member, and then we can assess if it's too challenging, if you want to move kind of in the interim. I'm not sure it makes sense to pause the meeting right now. Although now we seem to have lost Councilmember Gordon.
Madam President, the noise at City Hall is continuing. Councilmember Gordon is here in the chamber, and we'll be switching places just very shortly.
That was very quick. Okay.
There you go. So we'll try it like this. Appreciate that. So I would like to move number 18, which is the lease at 2633 Minnehaha, and refer it back to committee for further discussion. And I'd like to speak to that briefly.
Thank you, Councilmember. Go ahead.
As you may recall, at the committee where we looked at this, and was really the first time that the public had an opportunity to learn about this proposal, I kind of warned folks that I thought we were a little bit behind in doing our community engagement and involvement, and I committed to doing some work in the meantime. First of all, I just want to note that I really respect and appreciate the recommendation that came forward from Property Services staff. I believe that they did a thorough job of doing research, and they actually landed on a building that has a lot of positive things about it for a lease. And I wanted to make sure that I could help maybe in any way that I could to kind of move that forward to see if we could implement that recommendation if it would work. But I also understood there might be really big concerns from the community, and in fact there were. I'll just note that I was able to connect to a Longfellow Business Association and Seward Civic and Commerce Association meeting and bring this up. I was able to make it a topic of a block club meetings over the weekend. I was able to bring it up at the Longfellow Community Council Board of Directors meeting. And I was also able to conduct 2 meetings, one virtual meeting online and one meeting in person at a park. And it became clearer and clearer to me all along that way, as I'm sure you can imagine, that people weren't ready for this idea right now. I want you to be aware that the location of this building is about 1.5 blocks from the Cub grocery store that was vandalized and destroyed, maybe 2 blocks from that large apartment building fire. So as I brought this issue forward to people, I could see their eyes opening and their jaws dropping, and then I could hear their stories about the embers that landed in their backyard. And these are people that many of them work with the city government. They're proactive, they're problem solvers, and they don't want to be blocking something that they know might be in the public interest in general, if that makes sense to all of you. And there just became a theme that we really need more time. When this went to the Seward Neighborhood Group Board meeting, they passed a motion, and I believe they shared that with a letter with all of you. Also, to their credit, while I was scrambling to do community engagement with great support and participation from Property Services and from the police department, they were also surveying the residents and the businesses there. I worked hard to see if we could get a path forward so that I could join in recommending some kind of resolution to it today, but I don't think we have. I think many people are wondering why we could decide to do this now, and especially in this area. I got a lot of questions about how is this going to be different. I'll note that probably if this was a year ago, this wouldn't have raised the same concerns, but everything about community safety has changed right now in the city of Minneapolis since the killing of George Floyd, and people are anxious to get involved and engaged and having a discussion about what the new community safety is. And by bringing this forward now, many people were saying we haven't had the chance to have this conversation. People of all ages, of all races in Ward 2 are wanting to have some time to do more healing, some more deeper conversations about it, and to build a little bit more trust in their government and in policing before they feel comfortable moving forward for this. Right now, today, all I'm asking for is to refer it back to committee so we can do some work and see if there is some way to bring this forward, even in one cycle, so that we could look at that again and see if there's a possibility and maybe make a final decision then on the lease and whether or not this could possibly work as a police precinct, which I'll admit I have some doubts about, at least now. Although I've also looked at the possibility that the building could be leased somehow and we could put off having any policing activity going on in the building for a while until we can have a lot more community engagement. But I just need some more time to help work with my community and with the staff to see if we can come up with those some kind of conditions or some kind of opportunity or find a little bit of middle ground. And I will tell you this, we as a enterprise probably have to do a lot more work in figuring out where that middle ground is, because right now a lot of the people are divided in what they think they need and we need as a city and we want when it comes to community safety. I'm happy to talk more, answer any questions. I've probably said too much already.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be supporting Councilmember Gordon's motion today, and also I just want to thank the Councilmember for taking the time to explain the situation in its entirety. As this is seen in committee, what I would like to see from staff is a little more work on the racial equity impact analysis that is done. I had a chance to look at that, and I think it's sorely lacking, especially in the time we're in, and especially how it would affect the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schrader. I see Councilmember Kano in queue. I did put myself in to speak very briefly, and I do just want to say that I do know Councilmember Gordon to be a Councilmember who works very hard to, build consensus for difficult decisions in Ward 2. So I, over many years of experience on the council, and so I do take to heart when the council member says he needs more time for engagement on this very quick timeline. Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to add a couple of things, mostly for clarification for the public and for residents who are now tracking this conversation. I will be supporting Councilmember Gordon in his motion to send the item back to the committee, hoping that we have a much more detailed and public discussion of the various components of this decision. I wanted to say that, from my perspective and my understanding, I'm very thankful that the staff recommendation and I understand that other elected officials were involved in that staff recommendation to move the third precinct from the convention center into the Minnehaha location did not include bringing officers back to the old headquarters. So I want to commend the city for that, and I want to commend my colleagues and if other elected officials were involved in that decision making, that I think that was the right choice. I think we all know the deep symbolism and the constraints of the current third precinct headquarters located on East Lake Street and Minnehaha. So for the public record, for our residents, I think that it would be very helpful if that was acknowledged and if that was something that people could help raise awareness about, in that the conversations have not been about somehow making a public move to reinstate our city employees into the building that was heavily protested and eventually heavily damaged throughout the period of time where we saw the civil unrest. So I just wanted to, make sure people understood that was, to me, that's a win. That's a very good thing that the city is doing. Number two, I wanted to clarify that the third precinct was not eliminated. We didn't cut it from the budget. We didn't fire all the employees. And I'm sharing this because I'm getting different emails with different information. Most of it seems to show that people don't quite understand what is happening with those operations and those employees. I think there's a lot of assumptions that we got rid of it or that we disappeared it, and that now we're rebuilding it. The third precinct has always remained active. It has about 180 or more employees. When the third precinct building was evacuated and later damaged through the days that we all were a part of, they were moved to a different location. And so I just want it to be clear for our community, so there's no misunderstanding about the framing and the narrative around this. There is no rebuild here. The third precinct itself as a unit of operation has been active. People have continued to receive paychecks, and the city and especially elected officials have continued to expect them to do their work. And in fact, we know that many residents, specifically in the 9th Ward, have continued to seek the help and support of the 3rd Precinct. So I wanted to also clarify that. The impromptu headquarters that were created at the convention center come with certain costs and come with certain operating challenges. And so I hope that by us moving this conversation to the public sphere of a staff presentation at POGO or another committee, that we can really unpack those realities. Because I think some people have framed this conversation as a defund the police initiative, when I believe that we're actually spending more money housing the 3rd Precinct at the convention center than we would if we were to move them to a different room or to a different building. And so I've heard a lot of lack of clarity around those numbers. Does it cost more money to have them at the convention center or not? Would it cost less money to move them elsewhere? And what do those fiduciary decisions mean for us as the purveyors of public tax dollars, in understanding that we are in a state of shrinking resources, which does concern me, because I realize that we're going to have a very difficult budget decision process in November, and it'll start a few months before then. So I wanted to say that, one of the reasons I'm supporting this move is because we do need a clear accounting of the resources and the dollars and how they're being spent and where they're coming from. Are they coming from the MPD budget, or are they coming from another budget pool within the city enterprise? And just having those numbers really clearly accessible to residents, because there is this sort of assumption that this would be a move to defund the police, when in fact it may not be that. And so I think we all deserve to know the truth and deserve to understand those numbers more fully. I will say that from a community concerns perspective, I'm hearing sort of two very clear lines of thinking, and sometimes they're shared by the same person and sometimes they're not. One community concern is, if you put the 3rd precinct here, this will attract violence, because precincts are now a target for vandalism and destruction, and we don't want that in our backyard. And so that's very real. We know that happened to Lake Street and Minnehaha. We know that many businesses suffered the loss connected to being a part of that community. And so I want to acknowledge that fear is very real, and that we as a city need to have a strong plan for that, because it's true that we still have a police department, and that we will likely have a police department until voters decide whether or not the charter can be changed. And of course, we're all still talking about how that might be able to happen next year in November. So a lot of things are still in flux. A lot of decisions are still not very firm to provide clarity and confidence in how we're moving forward as a city with our policing systems. So we have to do the best, I believe, to make amends with what we have. And the team that we have right now is us, our community, our police department, and potentially other, players. So I want to, as much as possible, have a constructive dialogue that really centers love and compassion, and that we seek to understand versus seek to divide one another and shout each other down when these very difficult and complex decisions have to happen. So the community concern about, please don't bring this here because then my house will burn down or my community will burn down, are real, and we need to have a plan for that. And the other concerns about this is a moment where we get to abolish the police, really understanding what that means for the monetary uses of the city. And then lastly, I'll just comment on this interest of mine to really codify a coherent community engagement model to help us not to rethink public safety, because that mechanism has already been activated. We have already approved that resolution. There's already a work group, but to really decipher the future of Lake and Minnehaha, which is really an economic development project. It's an economic recovery project. It is a project about visioning, it's about togetherness, and it's about racial healing. It is not, to me, about what does the future of public safety look like. That's a different conversation. It is one thread that will certainly tie some conversations together internally in the enterprise as we make decisions on how to govern the city and how to bring our community forward, but it's not to replace the other, or it's not the same. And so I'll say that I'm really thankful for all the conversations that Councilmember Gordon and I have been able to make room and time for, and those are continue to happen. Councilmember Johnson and I were able to discuss some ideas and explore some potential ways forward. And I look forward to convening with all of us council members in the 3rd precinct, which also includes Councilmember Jeremy Schrader, to discuss how to bring forward a proposal to you as our colleagues about how do we handle the community engagement around recovery, economic recovery for Lake and Minnehaha, and then continue to support the other internal conversations we're having around what is the future of policing in our city, understanding that the future of the 3rd precinct would fall under that category. So I know that last week when the Longfellow Business Association or the Longfellow Neighborhood Association came together with the help of Hennepin County Commissioner Angela Conley, who kindly invited us as council members to participate in that discussion, a lot of ideas were shared, such as, why doesn't the county just own the 3rd precinct? Let them take it over, let them take charge. And I understand how folks might want to see that as a viable solution, because it seems like the city is carrying so much right now. But I'll say that all those conversations do need to happen in a coherent, externally legible way, so that it doesn't feel like all these backroom conversations where council members are meeting in someone's backyard at 9 p.m. or texting their other friend at 9 a.m. about like the future. It really does need to be a publicly held process with a clear website, with meeting minutes available for folks. And I agree with Councilmember Bender that they have to be staffed by city employees, by our city staff. And so at that Longfellow meeting, I made a note that I was working on this resolution. I'm still hoping to get there. It's not ready today, certainly, and I wouldn't bring it forward without the consent and agreement of my colleagues who also represent the 3rd precinct, because I think it's extremely valuable that the 4 of us get on the same page. And so I kindly ask for more patience and time from our community to help us get there. And hopefully, it'll come to a point where we can bring it to a vote within the next couple of weeks. So with that, I'll just say that I'm supporting Councilmember Gordon's motion today, and do hope that we get more clarity about all of the different impacts that this decision would likely have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, President Bender. I will support my colleagues who represent the wards most impacted by this decision in asking for a delay. And especially, I want to take this opportunity, since I didn't earlier, to congratulate and welcome Councilmember Osman. I actually heard from a lot of Ward 6 residents, as many of us have, while Ward 6 has not had representation. Representatives in adjacent wards have been stepping up to try to be responsive and make sure that people are still getting access to City Hall. And I have heard from a lot of Ward 6 residents who deserve to be represented in this conversation. So I want to congratulate Councilmember Osman and thank you for stepping up into some tough conversations. And it looks like this might be your first one. So welcome, and looking forward to having your voice in the conversation with us. And please reach out if there are any ways that we can support you in getting up and running as we move to consider some challenging issues. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm willing to support this motion, but I do have to say, not without some reservations. I know staff looked at 26 different sites, and this was really the site that they recommended. I know that any site, frankly, is going to be controversial for a temporary home, but at the same time, we have time sensitivity here due to the convention center's usage. It's hard for me to imagine that there's not some sort of impact to service when you have staff working that much further away. We also have a responsibility to our employees to provide a workspace for them that's conducive to doing that work. You know, the other piece of this too is that as we're talking about a new department, we're not talking about eliminating a public safety function. Whether it's MPD or it's a new community safety department, in a few years from now, we're still going to have staff and they're going to still have to work out of a space. And so I think about that as well with this. But I also respect if the council member needs 3 more weeks because of the ward week coming up on this. And especially another consideration is our new colleague, Councilmember Osman, and providing him an opportunity to talk with his community about any concerns they have and engage them as well. I also agree with my colleagues around the racial equity impact analysis. I thought that was extremely lacking. I'd like to see more there from staff. And I also think residents around the area, especially after the riots that we saw just the other night, they deserve more details around a security plan and to understand what that would look like to assure their safety as well if there are protests in the future at a site. I also want to request that staff, as we bring this forward to committee or have continued discussions, I'd like to understand the ability to use substations if that's an option, if the 3rd precinct would need to be housed out of one location, or if you could have it broken up into essentially multiple locations with substations. I know there's actually been some spots where a substation could make sense in my ward, and I think there's interest, at least from my conversations with another colleague in their ward as well. So I'd like to move forward with the decision sooner than later. I hope that 3 weeks can get us to that, because I think we really have a responsibility to make a decision on this one way or another sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Councilmember Gordon, for bringing this pause forward. My ward is also served by the 3rd precinct. At least half of my ward is, and the other half is served by the 5th precinct, which is also have been receiving number of threats and vandalism and been the site of protests. But you know, to Council Member Connell's point, you know, we do have to recognize the humanity of our employees that help to keep our city safe. And certainly there has been much controversy and consternation around the Minneapolis Police Department. But at the end of the day, they are our employees and deserve a safe and you know, suitable work environment so that they can provide the best level of safety to our community. So I'm absolutely supportive of this pause today, appreciate it, and will be supporting it. But you know, we do have to make these decisions, these very difficult decisions, you know, in a timely manner. And I hopefully we will be able to have some good conversation. You know, certainly the race equity impact analysis is a factor in my support, as well as the fact that you know, we have a brand new city council member who has not been a part of this conversation and deserves to have his input and engagement and involvement in it as well. So thank you, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon.
Well, after the 13 years or so, or whatever it is, I'm pretty good at counting votes, and I think I've heard at least 7 people, actually 8, who are supportive of this. So I wonder if we could just turn to a couple of the details to help the clerk out and all of us with our scheduling. It would make a lot of sense to refer this back to our policy oversight committee where it was before, but we also will now in this cycle have a public safety committee. So, but I don't want to necessarily step on the toes of any chairs and understand that. So I guess what I will do is I'll refer it back to our Policy Oversight Committee meeting on September 16th, but would welcome if somebody thought we should also get it to our public safety, we're calling it, I believe, the new committee, Public Health and Public Safety Committee on September 10th, because quite honestly, it's the public health and public safety portion of it that needs more of a deeper discussion rather than just the lease and the property management. But let's consider the motion right now to refer it to the POGO meeting on September 16th, unless Councilmember Cunningham wants to help get double review. And of course, you can imagine when I look at the work of it, I'm kind of telling you all that I could use all the help that I can get. I'm particularly looking forward to having Councilmember Osman on board, and I think this is a great first project for him to dig into. Sort of a hard way, I guess, to break yourself in, but I know that the people in the 6th Ward care deeply about this and have deep concerns, and he'll want to help us get through this. Was that clear enough of a motion for the clerk and the council president?
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. So Councilmember Gordon has moved to refer it to back to the Policy and Government Oversight Committee, which, as he mentioned, later in our agenda, we will maintain as part of a restructured council with a more narrow scope, which will include the coordinator's office and property services. Councilmember Cunningham, did you want to comment about the question around the Public Health and Safety Committee?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add, if it felt most appropriate for this item to come to the Public Health and Safety Committee, that while it's not, I can't officially say, yeah, bring it on in since it doesn't quite exist yet, but given that there are two topics, you have the public safety aspect as well as the property services, I think it would be helpful to have it go through that committee so that we can get into that topical component of it. So, so I'll just put that out there for consideration. I'm not sure how that would work motion-wise since it doesn't exist yet, but just wanted to put that out there.
Could I just say end to the public safety, public health meeting of September 10th pending its creation?
Madam President, if it's the will of the council to have this go through both committees, we would simply amend the motion currently pending to say to refer this to the Public Health and Safety Committee, which meets on September 10th at 1:30, and to then further refer this to the Policy and Government Oversight Committee, which meets on September 16th at 1:30. It would then come to the council in the next cycle, which with the upcoming ward work week is not until Friday, 9:30 a.m. on September 18. So it'd be a joint referral to the two committees.
Thank you. So that looks like the intention from Councilmember Gordon. Is there any discussion on Councilmember Gordon's motion? Any further after that significant discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher. Aye. Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Cano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and that item is postponed and referred to those committees as described. I perhaps should have mentioned this earlier during the discussion, but I do want to note that this is an example of the tension we're seeing absent a staff-led community engagement process around public safety in our city. And I know we had a presentation where staff presented some very understandable barriers to beginning that conversation with our community, but we are also being asked by those same departments to make decisions related to public safety. And there are other pieces of our typical decision-making cycle, including our budget, which are upcoming, which we will need to make decisions about whether or not we have done that kind of community engagement. So I know I have followed up with the coordinator's office, which houses our community engagement functions and our communication functions of the city, as well as the property services and others, as well as the health department, which includes our violence prevention office. And I know Councilmember Cunningham is also talking with staff. I think we've both communicated that if more resources are needed, or if the conversations that many of us, I think, at the city have had about external funding for additional resources are needed, that we just really urgently need to understand what needs to be in place so that we can begin a process of even very simple communications and engagement with our community. If we are not able and ready to start with a survey or some open houses, I don't know how we can move forward with these kinds of big, impactful decisions. So we're working with staff to resolve that tension, and again, understanding the perspective that the staff presented, but also knowing that decisions are coming, and that not having adequate engagement in place is really doing nothing to reestablish trust and transparency. So thank you for indulging that comment here. The next order of business is reports from our special committees, and we do have a report this morning from the Executive Committee related to the 2020 State Gender Pay Equity Test. I'll recognize Council Vice President for that report.
Thank you, Madam President. The Executive Committee brings forward one item for consideration today, which is the increase to the salary schedules for 35 jobs in the non-represented, non-appointed groups by eliminating salary steps in order to meet the state's gender pay equity salary range tests. Essentially, what we're doing is, what this would do is to continue to eliminate the gap between males and females in compensation. So I move that this item be referred to the Policy and Government Oversight Committee for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President has moved that item, that it be referred to the Policy and Government Oversight Committee in the next cycle. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and that is referred. The next item in our agenda is the notice of ordinance introductions. We have a number of notices to give this morning. First, Councilmember Palmisano gives notice of intent to introduce at the next regular meeting the subject matter of an ordinance to amend the code by extending the term of the existing cable television franchise agreement with CenturyLink to December 16th. Second, Councilmembers Gordon and Schrader give notice of their intent to introduce at the next regular meeting the subject matter of an ordinance amending the zoning code in several chapters listed on the agenda related to the regulations governing the number of people that may be served in emergency shelters. And third, Councilmember Reich will gives notice of intent to introduce the subject matter of an ordinance to amend definitions related to solid waste to align with the state statute. Are there any questions or comments about any of those notices? Seeing none, those notices are given and no further action is required. We do have the new added item brought by Councilmembers Goodman and Jenkins. I think I will take that item up now, and that is in ordinance introduction that, because it was not previously noticed, requires unanimous consent. And that is related to the barriers that Councilmember Goodman and the awnings, and I'm forgetting the technical word, but that Councilmembers Goodman and Jenkins described earlier. So there we go. Thank you.
Madam President, we're showing it now on the screen.
So this is a notice to introduce the subject matter of an ordinance amending Title 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances related to the zoning code, and that would be repealing the ban on retractable exterior security devices, and is on the screen. I will move that item on behalf of my colleagues. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano. Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Cano.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano. Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I don't, but I'm sorry, this is Lene back. Could you come back around?
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
But President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and that introduction is made and referred. Okay, now we are returning to the order of new business to take up the items that are listed as numbers 2 through 11 at the top of our agenda. The first item pertains to the planned expansion of our standing committee system and operating structure, which I've talked about at a high level at a number of our previous meetings, and had the chance to send around to council offices and staff. As reflected in the draft resolution, this plan adds 2 standing committees to our structure, the Transportation and Public Works Committee and a new combined Public Health and Safety Committee. And that would combine the Public Health, Environment, and Civil Rights and Engagement Committee with the Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee, although it does move some of the sustainability related items of that committee into the POGO committee, because those are under the coordinator's office, just for kind of workload balance and simplicity. We'll fold the previous Housing and Policy Development Committee into the existing Business Inspections and Zoning Committee, and then there will still be the Policy and Government Oversight Committee, including its 2 subcommittees, which are on equity and finance. We will also continue to have our budget committee as we begin the process of the 2021 proposed budget. And then we have a number of other committees that will remain unchanged that are outlined in the charter, the audit committee, the executive committee, etc. So the clerk has, again, the clerk and I have circulated this resolution. I will move approval of this item. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from council members about this structure? Councilmember Cunningham. In my mind, I had called on you.
Thank you, Madam President. So I wanted to first just say thank you for the space to speak and for this proposed council committee restructure. Given that we are experiencing extreme pressures around public health and public safety, as the proposed chair of the new Public Health and Safety Committee, I wanted to speak to what this new committee will look like under my leadership, specifically regarding public safety. First, I just want to name that I will take my new role very seriously, and you can count on me to take the health and safety of our city seriously. Residents have many concerns and questions around the present and future of public safety in Minneapolis, and I intend to use my role as the chair to do everything in the City Council's power to increase safety for all Minneapolis residents, communities, and businesses. Under my leadership, there will be 4 main goal areas on which this committee will focus. The first is to depoliticize public safety to the greatest extent possible by increasing transparency and creating space for all voices and perspectives at the table as we come up with solutions to our most pressing issues, like the increased violence across our city. This issue impacts every resident, every community, every business across our city. So we all must come together and play a role in how we can move forward to create safety in our city. The second goal area is to critically analyze systematically how we keep Minneapolis residents safe through the public health approach by collaborating with our amazing city staff and national experts on crime and violence prevention and intervention, and working directly with Minneapolis residents to enhance and clarify our understanding of the underlying issues that cause increases in crime and violence in our city. The third goal area is for me to continue leading and for us as a council to prioritize the reimagining public safety work and the community engagement that will drive that work. Lastly, the fourth goal area is for this committee to lead communications about and shape messaging from the City Council around public safety. Since the murder of George Floyd, the City Council has had significant challenges around creating and disseminating a clear message and correct information around public safety, which has led to confusion and an incorrect narrative about our perspective and approach to reimagining public safety in our city. As the chair of this committee, my goal is to provide the residents of Minneapolis with clear and timely information about future plans for and changes to public safety. With all that being said, I ask for your support to step into leadership as the chair of this new Health and Public Safety Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Is there any further discussion on this item? I don't see any. I will note it will be a great relief to me, having chaired the POGO committee for these last months, to have many of you step up in chairing these committees. So I'm very grateful. We'll have Councilmember Goodman and Schrader as chair and vice chair of the new Biz committee, Councilmember Cunningham and Fletcher as the chair and vice chair of the Public Health and Safety Committee, Councilmember Jenkins as the chair of POGO, with Councilmember Ellison as chair of the Equity Subcommittee, and Councilmember Fletcher, the chair of the Finance Committee, and Councilmember Palmisano continuing to chair the Budget Committee. So just appreciate both all of you who've stepped up into leadership, and then also those of you who are not serving as a chair in this new consolidated structure, knowing that your leadership is still incredibly important. And we've seen many examples of council members who, in the consolidated structure under POGO, when there are essentially 8 committees in that one, who were still, stepping up to lead in the issue area that was part of their previous chair role, or that is important in their ward. So that teamwork of both stepping up and also supporting each other's leadership is so important right now, and I can't express enough how much I appreciate everyone's collaboration and how well this body is working together. We were also able to incorporate Councilmember Osman into this structure. Essentially, he's taking my place on the Biz committee, or what used to be the housing and zoning committees. So I'm just really excited that we were able to place someone with such expertise and experience in housing, and also from a ward that where that is such a critical issue, along with economic development and all of the things that touch CPED, into that position, and thank him for stepping up to do that in this very busy time as a new council member. So thank you all again. Mr. Carl.
Madam President, probably out of my lane or jurisdiction, but with your indulgence, a compliment to you. The city has been operating under an emergency status for 6 months now. And during that 6 months, we've had 3 declared emergencies. It's been very tough, not only on the community, but especially internally, as you know, on the city enterprise. And I wanted to thank you and also recognize the work you've done that probably, in fact, I will say it goes without notice or recognition or awareness by the community, and probably many internally as well. Not only are you elected from the 10th ward and represent one of the 13 wards, and therefore 13th of the community, but you're also the president of City Council, and I work very closely with you in that capacity. So I have been able to see over this past 6 months, under the restructure, how you've stepped up and taken on what was essentially in the prior pre-COVID era, 8 different committees, president of council, working remotely, and Ward 10. And it has been very stressful, I assume, on you. I know you have been gracious to me. You had wanted to extend the committee structure many months ago, and I begged you not to. And so for helping the enterprise get through a very difficult period and taking on that work, which certainly was an additional burden on you, but did relieve at least my office and I believe all departments and focused us through. I want to publicly say thank you for your leadership. I appreciate it, and I know it is a relief to you to have this new structure put in place.
Thank you, Mr. Carl, and thanks again to all the staff who've stepped up so much to support us through this with so many additional responsibilities. Anything further on this? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and that is adopted. So we will begin this new council structure in the next cycle, which will come after the ward work week, which is scheduled next week, leading up to the Labor Day holiday. And thank you all again. So then we move to items 3 through 11. These are items under new business which need to be rescheduled or scheduled for the first time, according to the new committee structure that we've just adopted. So these items are essentially administratively approving and scheduling those hearings as reflected on the agenda. So I'll summarize those for the record. Items 3, 4, and 5 are public hearings to be conducted as part of the September 8th meeting of the Business Inspections, Housing, and Zoning Committee to consider the sale of properties located at 1512 23rd Street East, 2803 Aldrich Avenue North, and 1111 James Avenue North. Item 6 is a public hearing to be conducted at that same meeting to consider an amendment to the 2020 Consolidated Plan Action Plan for proposed changes to the single-family housing program using home investment partnership funding and a staff directive to prepare and submit the 2020 Consolidated Action Plan to HUD. Items 7, 8, and 9 are rescheduling public hearings for the September 23rd regular meeting of the Transportation and Public Works Committee on sanitary sewer service availability charges, snow and ice removal assessments for public sidewalks, and assessments for charges for sidewalk repair and construction that remain unpaid. Items 10 and 11 are setting a public hearing for the October 7th meeting of the Transportation and Public Works Committee on special service districts 2021 proposed services and service changes, and for water and sewer service line repair assessments. Are there any questions or comments on any of those items? Is there a motion to approve the scheduling and rescheduling those items on the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. The clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Reich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Osman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That passes, and those items are those hearings will be set as detailed on the agenda. That concludes all of our business. So the next order of business is simply the announcements. Are there any announcements from council members? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. And, today I just want to announce that today is the 57th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington. A very seminal moment in American history. And I think it is deeply appropriate to lift that up today as we are continuing to grapple as a nation with some of the very same issues that Dr. King and many others brought to the attention of the federal government and the entire nation on August 28th, 1963. And so wanted to lift that up and really lay out, the fact that here in Minneapolis, we are needing to go through a very similar reckoning as we already are. And, everybody has very differing opinions about these issues. But I do believe that everybody has very similar goals, and that is to have a safe, equitable Minneapolis that treats all of its residents and citizens with respect and provides opportunities for our young people, provides safety for everyone in our community. And, the work that started 57 years ago and much longer before that still continues. And everybody has a role and a responsibility to play to try and lead this work to 13 people is unrealistic and unproductive. And so I am calling on all of the residents of Minneapolis today to help us to live out the true meaning of Dr. King's dream. Many people reference his speeches all the time, but we must do the work to bring that into reality. So just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that on this dais today, August 28th, Black August, which is the 57th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President, and thank you for your leadership and lending voice so beautifully to what lies ahead for our city. I've been telling my constituents that there's just no going back for Minneapolis, and the only way for us forward is to reckon with and reconcile our history of racial injustice and the current racial inequalities that are so pervasive in our city. And that takes all of us across the city, especially those in wards that have significant privilege. So I think
if I hear something different, I'll let you know.
So important, and I appreciate again you bringing it up and highlighting that today. Any other announcements from council members? Seeing none, we've completed all items on our agenda. With nothing further to come before the council, and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. I hope everyone has a very safe and peaceful weekend in Minneapolis over the Labor Day holiday. Thank you. Oh, that's coming up in a week. Sorry. I still hope everyone has a safe holiday, a safe weekend this weekend, and of course next weekend as well. We are adjourned.